Welcome to the Puberty Prof podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics. Here is your host, Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof, a nationally recognized health educator, author of the award-winning book, Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty, and creator of the Talk Puberty app.
Hi, and welcome to the Puberty Prof podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof. Today's episode is focusing on more common questions children or young people ask about pubertal changes, but we're going to be very specific and focus on the questions that children ask about breasts and breast development. To help me out, I have this really neat person. She won the New York State AHPERD Amazing Person of the Year Award for technology use last year, and her name is Megan Vlad. She is a health educator, and you know that I love my peers, and especially ones that love working with middle school children. So I thank you so much for being here today, Megan. Would you like to say hello to our audience?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Do you mind giving us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I grew up in New York State in Westchester County for all of my K-12 years. I then went off to college and graduated with my degree in physical and health education from Coastal Carolina University in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or just outside of Myrtle Beach. And I then decided I wanted to come home because I didn't feel that I could really pursue what I wanted to in the world of health education with where I was. So I came back home. I pursued my master's degree in health education from Lehman College, which is one of the CUNY schools. And then I immediately started teaching as soon as I graduated from my undergrad. And it was a great experience. I worked in the Bronx for a few years. I had amazing opportunities to develop health curriculum in the K-5 setting, as well as just be exposed to tons of resources and people that could really help to shape me into the health educator that I am today.
Thanks again for being here today. And I love that you have experience in the elementary school setting.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And I love that I'm in middle now. I think that bridge between elementary and middle, specifically for health, is really important because that's when puberty is really starting for these young people and they have a lot of questions.
Well, like I said earlier, today we're going to be focusing on some of the questions that are commonly asked about breasts and breast development. Yet first, my first question to you is, do you remember this experience yourself?
Oh, yes, I do. So I was a late bloomer, and I very much looked to my friends and my cousins very jealously that they were developing at a much quicker pace than I was. And I internalized a lot of that. And I felt very self-conscious through my middle school years because of that. I remember specifically in fourth grade, a girl brought in the American Girl doll book that was called The
Yes.
Carekeeping of You. And it was like when you see in the movies the dirty magazine scenes, that's how it felt, was like she brought this over at recess and pulled the page open specifically to finding a bra. And they had the stages of breast development and just my jaw dropping because when I looked in the mirror, that was not how my body looked. And just being in awe that someone brought this into school, which probably was not allowed. But interestingly enough, my mom had bought me the same book. And it was within that week that she had kind of left it just out and about for me to find, which is actually something I recommend to many parents that I talk to that are like, how do I start this conversation? Leave a book out. They will explore it on their own when they're interested. And then you can start those conversations up. And so that really did start the conversations specific to the bodily changes that I would go through with my mom. But just knowing that other people were seeing this book, had this book, it felt like a rite of passage or kind of normalized it for me that, other people were talking about this with their parents and I can too.
Well, you mentioned that it was in the fourth grade that your friend brought in this book. And did you
Yes.
note that some of your peers were already starting to grow breasts?
Yeah, I was definitely aware of it. I remember also this same girl bringing in a limited two, which I think is now the Justice brand of clothing line, and her looking at training bras, which in reality, there, in my opinion, is no such thing as a training bra. It's just a piece of fabric and it gets you used to wearing a bra. So I can understand the training aspect, but it's not training, your body to really do anything but be used to this additional layer. And my friend saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm getting this bra," and talking about sizes. And I had no idea what they were talking about. So I felt out of the loop, but I think I probably just played along like I knew that, yeah, everybody wears a bra. Yeah, of course I wear a bra. And meanwhile, I did not at all, nor did I need one at that point in time.
Megan has agreed to return for another mini episode to talk more about bras and then those tank tops that she referred to. So we're going to focus today, though, on more of the questions that children will ask about the breast development. So thanks for sharing your experience, Megan. And when you talk with children about this development, when do you usually explain that it happens for most girls?
So I talk about the onset of puberty being around age 8 is when it can start up through age 13. And we talk about how the first signs physically are breast buds. And that's going to be kind of just a raised area around the nipple. And this is going to be the first kind of signs of it where you're noticing physical changes with your naked eye.
And so what age would you say, like, a lot of people start developing that budding by the fifth grade? So maybe anywhere between 10 and 12, because that's usually when I explain it, although some can be later than that. But if we look at a mean or an average age, somewhere between 10 and 12, most would experience it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
And would you mind sharing, what are breasts made of?
So breasts are made of a couple different things. There's ligaments that help hold structures in place. There are connective tissues. There's fatty tissues. There's ducts, which are kind of like little pathways, and mammary glands, which is all mammals have these. Humans are mammals, so we in fact have mammary glands, which will then feed offspring if we so choose to have them. And so I actually have with me today some grapes, which are a really great way to kind of explain this inner workings of breast tissue. So we can kind of imagine that the grape itself is a structure called a lobe, which is a gland. And so this lobe is connected to the ducts, and the ducts are like the vine that runs within the center of the grape and then to each individual grape. So this is able to carry nutrients. It's able to carry eventually milk to feed an offspring from the mammary glands. And so grapes, I think, are a great way to introduce this. It's a tangible way to understand it and understand the inner workings.
Reminder to our listeners that you can watch this on my YouTube channel, Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof. So feel free to do that if you want to even see how Megan held the grapes and how she was pointing things out, because that's a phenomenal analogy for how to explain what's in our breasts.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important for young people and even, caregivers to know that there's easy ways to break down exactly what's kind of going in our bodies that doesn't have to be super medically accurate, like scientific wording. It can be broken down to, it's like grapes.
Yeah, yeah. And does it matter, like if you held up some grapes in which, if you can hold them up again, they
Yeah.
kind of fit into the palm of your hand, correct?
Yes. This
Okay.
bunch, yes.
Okay. So does it matter, like, since you're showing something that's a handful, does it matter the size of the breasts for people that are growing them?
No, not at all. Everyone's going to develop differently and at different stages. Lots of times, breasts don't even end up being the same size on both sides, and size and function don't correlate. So it's something where lots of people do focus on size of breasts, I think, especially as young people are developing. And if they're noticing that friends are developing, quicker than they are. So similar to my situation where my friends, my family members were all developing at a faster rate than I was. And I very much thought that, something was wrong, or, why isn't this happening to me or for me yet? And eventually I did develop, and I developed exactly how and when I was supposed to. And even, as I developed, there was times that I felt insecure or uncomfortable, or self-conscious about my development and, compared to other people. But size and function do not correlate at all. Some people may choose to get breast implants if they feel more comfortable and confident with a larger breast. Other people may feel more comfortable physically due to back pain, or just because they're not happy with the size of their breast, to get a reduction and get some of that tissue removed by a plastic surgeon.
Yeah. Yeah, I know sometimes I hear some young people struggle with like, oh, I wish my breasts were bigger. I wish they were like this. And I think you and I, Megan, are on the same page of love your body. There's a reason why you have this body, appreciate it. Like you said, breasts, even the breasts on your body you have too, they might look different. Sometimes the nipple that's in the middle of the breast, they might be pointing forward, they might be pointing down, up, to the right, to the left. And that shows us that there's so many differences between us. And so the whole thing about size, it's just who you are, and to appreciate who you are. Like Megan said, if you want to have a reduction, and I do know more females that had a reduction, but you had mentioned before we started recording that about people that had a reduction and then actually chose to have implants. But we want you to be happy about your breasts.
Yeah, that's definitely what is most important. And if someone is struggling with their own identity or feeling comfortable and confident within their skin, then I think that's something really important that they should explore. And whether that's self-exploration or with, the help of, a workbook or other people like professionals such as a therapist, that can really help them dive a little deeper into why am I feeling this way and how can I learn to appreciate all that my body does for me.
Yeah. And I know when I was in fifth grade, there was this exercise that a lot of the girls talked about, and it was like putting your elbows to the side and pushing your chest out, and there was a saying. I don't know if you had it because I'm older than you. I don't know if you heard it. It was something like you must increase your bust, something like that. And there's no exercises really to increase the size. Would you agree?
To my knowledge, no. The pectoral muscles that are behind the breast tissue, sure can, increase in size as you're doing those exercises, but it would never grow to the point of creating larger breast tissue. That would definitely not occur through exercise.
And for nerve endings, from what I understand, what the research tells us is that we basically have around the same amount of nerve endings for our breasts. So smaller breasts might be more sensitive than larger breasts because they have to expand. So there's, again, pros and cons for having larger or smaller breasts. So attempt to love what you have overall. That's my advice for young people. And you've said at least twice that we have a function. There's a reason why those of us that identify as a biological female, why we have breasts. And what's that reason?
To feed babies, if we choose to have them.
Yes. And then that goes back to the glands that you had mentioned. And typically that wouldn't be able to happen until after you had a pregnancy.
Correct. There could be odd situations where someone may be producing milk when they are not pregnant or have not given birth. And that would obviously require a trip to the doctor to see kind of what's going on beneath the surface. But under most circumstances, it's usually after pregnancy has occurred.
Well, what advice do you have for a young person, or if there's a caretaker listening that is going to talk to a young person, what advice do you have that if somebody is growing breasts and they feel awkward, because they can get itchy as they grow, and there might be hardness in the nipple or some soreness, what advice do you have for a young person?
I would say that all of these things you're feeling are normal. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to have questions about why you're feeling this way, or kind of that, is this normal? Am I normal questions? So I think talking to a trusted adult is really important. And sometimes that's a caregiver and sometimes it's not. And that's never something a caregiver should take personally. some people just aren't comfortable talking to their caregiver, depending on the situation, about their body and development. So I think really finding that person that you can go to for reliable information, or if you're concerned about something, is important. I think another great resource is using books that are written about puberty that are put out by the American Pediatric Societies, or doctors in general, people that really have put in the time and effort to research these things and provide medically accurate information in kid-friendly terms. So I think, questioning is normal. I think it's important. And asking questions about our body is something we're going to do for the rest of our lives. And whether you are going through puberty or you've already gone through puberty, and you're just going to be, at certain points during your menstrual cycle where you are going to be more sensitive or have a tender, sore feeling, itchiness, that doesn't always go away. It's something that can stick with you, throughout your time as a menstruating female.
Yeah. I will admit that usually right before my period or the first day of my period, my breast would get sore if I go for a jog. And it's this sense that for the first minute of jogging, I feel just the soreness. And sometimes I have to wear additional support to help feel that my breasts aren't as sore. Because if it's part of my inheritance, I have larger breasts. So running or jogging, it makes them bounce around a little bit. So to wear something more supportive, especially when they're sore. I don't know if you hear of a lot of young people that also experience that.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that and experienced that myself. I'm of that same similar genetic makeup, and have a larger chest. And, going back to what we were talking about with my own experiences, is being a late bloomer. And then in high school, I had very large breasts compared to other people. And people did point that out, and, would make comments or, give me nicknames that had to do with the size of my breasts. And I was fortunately confident enough, and secure enough to kind of combat those things and, ask questions of why. But I think, supporting breasts as they're developing with whatever feels comfortable. So whether that is something where you are doubling up on a top layer of something, whether it's like a sports bra or two sports bras, or whatever really feels comfortable, for you. That's what's important, is that you're comfortable and you feel confident in what you're doing and what you're wearing. And if you don't feel that way, you're not going to feel good at all. So I think that's a really important thing. And, the fact that you bring that up and recognize that, right? Even as adults, we still are struggling with these things. And sometimes it just doesn't feel right. And I have those exact same moments when I'm going to be on my period. I have a very fullness feeling, to my breasts. And yeah, when I'm exercising, I absolutely need probably a little bit more support during those times.
And another thing that's a norm for a lot of us is sometimes in the nipple area, it might get like a little bit of a white, kind of like a powdery kind of look it's usually not that much, and that's usually just a secretion from the nipple. Typically, if I say the word normal, but certainly if you ever feel anything weird about your breasts, like you can talk to a medical professional. So we have to teach children to ask questions and tell people if they feel any kind of weirdness, because again, soreness can be quote unquote normal, especially when we are about to get our period or have our period. But if we feel that it's lasting longer, if we find that maybe there's more liquid coming out of the nipple or something, or any liquid coming out of the nipple, or if we find a lump in our breast or something. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And what's interesting is when I'm talking to my middle school students about the doctor in general, I tell them, you are at the age you can kick your parents out of there.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the doctors, from what I've heard and what I've experienced, is during those adolescent years, doctors will start to ask your parent to step out of the room so that you can have those questions asked in a safe environment, which may be with your parent or guardian in the room, and sometimes it may not be. So I always tell my students, you can kick your parents out. You can have a private conversation that is just between you and the doctor. You can fess up to anything that you were afraid to when your parents were in the room. You can ask questions about things that you might feel uncomfortable asking with your parent there, or don't feel comfortable asking to a parent or guardian. And I think that's a really great opportunity, especially when we find something that we consider to be a little bit out of the norm. But I would agree absolutely. If something feels tender for too long, if something is kind of itchy for too long, if we're noticing secretions, all of our bodies have different openings to them, right? The nipples being also one of those. And so if we're noticing excess amounts of anything, it should make us kind of raise a red flag and say, why is this happening? And look further into it.
Yes. Yes. And certainly, yeah, I love, like you said, to ask the doctor, and you have the right to talk alone, because there will be sometimes medical professionals that will ask the parent to step out, or the caregiver to step out. So thanks for reminding me of that. I also want to remind our listeners to make sure to remind young people to know their bodies. So regarding breasts, if a young person's in the shower, they can soap up their hands, and then they can actually feel the different areas of their budding breast. Because I know some people would say, well, as you get older, you can go and get a mammography, but you're with your body 24/7. So you're going to know what's quote unquote normal and what's not normal for your body. And you have the right to know and to feel what your breasts are like. That's because it's your body. And there's nothing unhealthy about doing that. There's nothing wrong about doing that, because again, it's your body.
Yeah. And I think going until you get a concrete answer is also important. You and I have talked off air about some issues I had orthopedically with my hips. And I struggled with this from when I was 13 years old up until I was 26 before I got a diagnosis. And it took a lot of time and people saying no, and knowing my body and knowing something was not right. And so it's important that we continue to seek things out when we know something just isn't quite right with our body. And eventually, when I got that diagnosis, I was able to treat it and start to see a really, really big difference in just my abilities and how I felt day to day. So I always really encourage young people, whether it's something that you need an answer to a question, or you need to tell someone about something and they're just not taking you seriously, you keep going to those people, right? Those trusted adults, those doctors, whoever can answer that question or help you, you keep going until you get the help that you need.
Lovely. Thank you for reminding us of that, Megan. Thank you so much. We're coming to the end of today's recording. Yet before we end, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think it's just important, like you said, to know your body, to not be afraid to ask questions, and really identify those people that you can ask those questions to. And they may be someone that's in a school, it may be a doctor, it may be a friend's parent, it may be another relative, it could be your own parent or caregiver.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here. And Megan is returning to be on another episode to talk about how to best support breasts, even when they're slowly developing or quickly developing, depending upon what your body is like. So please tune in for that. That'll be a future episode. I thank you all for listening in. If you would like to get in touch with me, feel free to email me at pubertyprof@gmail.com, or go check out my website at pubertyprof.com. Again, thanks for listening in, and I hope that you have a happy and healthy day.
Thank you for listening to the Puberty Prof podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow the Puberty Prof on Twitter or Instagram. The Puberty Prof, Lori Reichel, wants to hear from you. Go to pubertyprof.com or click on the link in this episode's description. There you can find more information, as well as ask questions to be answered by the Puberty Prof in a future episode. That's pubertyprof.com. Also, remember to check out the Talk Puberty app and the book, Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty. Until next time, this is the Puberty Prof podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics.